Next, we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Jamillah Karim. She's an award-winning author, speaker, and blogger. She specializes in race, gender, and Islam in America. Jamillah is an author of Women of the Nation, Between Black Protest and Sunni Islam, with Dawn Marie Gibson, an American Muslim woman negotiating race, class, and gender within the Ummah, which was awarded the 2008 Book Award in the Social Sciences by the Association of the Asian American Studies. She's currently working on a new book, Radical Love, where she explores the depth and beauty of divine and human love. Please welcome Dr. Jamillah Karim.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi. This famous photo of women in the Nation of Islam was captured by Gordon Parks, the Black American photographer known for his civil rights photojournalism. As Parks likely saw it, I view the Nation of Islam as the Muslim side of the civil rights movement. A colleague sent me this photo from the current issue of Vogue magazine. She thought of me because I gave a talk at Duke in 2019 on women of the Nation of Islam as pioneers of Muslim fashion in the US. Of course, I had to run out and purchase a copy for myself. The model is Bad Abdi, born in Somalia, and her image is found throughout the issue. Although this photo is in black and white, it's meant to rep Muslim women of the present. I certainly see myself in this photo, and I imagine that you see yourself. If not, I invite you to. For certainly, Vogue's featuring black hijabis in 2020 is a result of all our efforts, whether it's Ibtihaj Muhammad, Linda Sarsour, Halima Aden, or Aisha Karim, just a regular sister at the masjid. Actually, she's my real sister. But as I note on Hagar Lives, a blog that my sister Aisha and I started, our Muslim mama's been rocking hijab since before we were babies. So when I saw the Vogue photo, my first thought was nation women and their unique style of headgear. But in reality, not so unique. Clearly, that's a nun's habit. And that's precisely why the Nation of Islam was so successful. It adopted familiar American symbols to attract the masses to its black protest version of Islam. So when I saw this beautiful Somali woman, I saw this photo of my second grade teacher, a photo of her in 1974 when she was in the Nation of Islam. I also saw this photo of my mother and father. Black Muslim women of my mother's generation, and even before her, women who embraced Islam in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, made it cool and bold and beautiful to wear the scarf when it was terribly unpopular or even unthinkable to do so. One sister I interviewed noted, "I strive to let people know that if it wasn't for the sisters prior to me before 1975, I wouldn't be able to wear a khimar, headpiece, veil, or whatever. None of us would. I wouldn't be able to carry the name Muhammad." Only with this consciousness of what our mothers bore before us can we claim and carry the legacy. If not for Ibtihaj Muhammad's mother, Sister Denise, spotting girls fencing at a high school and directing Ibtihaj to the sport that would make her famous and us proud, there would be no Ibtihaj Barbie to inspire a whole nother generation of Muslim girls. Inspired by women like Sister Denise, we claim the legacy. Living out beautiful expressions of our authentic selves, as does Ibtihaj, we carry the legacy. Both Ibtihaj and I are alumni of Duke University. Another thing we have in common is our parents' connection to the Nation of Islam. In an interview with the Muslim Journal, Ibtihaj's father, Brother Shamsuddin Muhammad, explained, "My first formal introduction came from Newark during the 70s with the teachings of the Nation of Islam. Then, with the transition of Al-Islam, or the transition to Al-Islam, through Imam W.D. Muhammad, I started practicing the tenets of Al-Islam to raise my family as Muslims, following the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Quran. Freedom's daughters. The Unsung Heroines of the Civil Rights Movement is one of my favorite books. I mention it here because it captures how I imagine myself. As a daughter of parents who came to Islam through the Nation of Islam, I consider myself among freedom's daughters. This is a picture of me as a baby, 1976. By the way, Nation women made their own clothes, which explains my mom's matching headpiece and top. You can tell, though, that her headpiece is a new style, and it's because she's no longer in the Nation of Islam. Not just my mother, but the whole Nation community, more or less, made the transition to al-Islam, which Ibti Hajj's father refers to. For those not familiar with the transition, here's a quick history of the Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam was founded by Farad Muhammad, who came to Detroit in 1930. Reversing the dominant race narrative, Farad taught that the black man was God, the white man was the devil, and that Islam was the black man's original religion. And by accepting Islam, African Americans were claiming their true, dignified identity, which was stripped away during slavery. Elijah Muhammad became an ardent follower of Farad and eventually succeeded him as the leader of the nation after he mysteriously disappeared in 1934. Elijah Muhammad taught his followers to be financially independent of whites and the government by pooling their resources and sustaining a separate, cohesive community. Do for self was his motto. Malcolm X came to be Elijah Muhammad's most popular and charismatic minister. Malcolm played an enormous role in making the Nation of Islam the most successful black nationalist movement in history. In 1975, Elijah Muhammad died, and his son, Wallace D. Muhammad, became the new leader of the Nation of Islam. Immediately, Imam W.D. Muhammad began moving the nation community away from the black nationalist teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad to the religious teachings of mainstream Islam, global Islam. I grew up in the W.D. Muhammad community in Atlanta, and I have inherited this rich history and legacy from women role models. I call them community mothers, who were leaders, organizers, and activists. And I am calling you to claim this legacy too. If you hadn't already, it's the right time, right now. And Uqbat Abdi, a woman born in Somalia, modeling what resembles the Nation of Islam women's uniform in Vogue magazine, is stunning proof that now is the time. Right time, right now. I love our theme today, and it resonates with one of my favorite speeches by Oprah Winfrey. She said, "Nothing about my life is lucky. Nothing. A lot of grace, a lot of blessings, a lot of divine order, but I don't believe in luck. For me, luck is preparation meeting the moment of opportunity. The truth is, for me and for every person, every single thing that has ever happened in your life is preparing you for the moment that is to come. A lot of people don't know their purpose. And if you don't know your purpose, your immediate goal is to figure that out." I attended Oprah's 2020 Vision Tour in Atlanta, Georgia this past January. There, she talked about figuring out your purpose and your power. I saw that Sister Haya is doing a workshop today entitled Recognizing Your Power. I was once asked in front of an MSA audience in Boston, what has been one highly formative event or encounter in your career or personal formation? Another way to have asked that question, when did you recognize your power? And this is what I told that audience. It was December 29th, 2007, and I was the only female speaker or scholar speaking at the largest Muslim convention in North America, the RIS, or Reviving the Islamic Spirit Convention in Toronto, Canada. RIS does better now with 5 or so women speakers, but I spoke there at a time just a little over a decade ago when it was commonplace for women speakers to be glaringly underrepresented at conferences, panels, and workshops all over this country. I was therefore a trailblazer alongside these 2 women, Dr. Ingrid Mattson and Atala Shabazz. Up to 2008, we were the only women scholars featured out of a sea of men, only one of us each year. I will never forget the way that women swarmed around me when they saw me off stage. Their resounding embrace strongly impressed this fact upon me. Women were dying to see themselves on the RIS stage. But it was a little girl that left the strongest impression upon me. As noted, I was the only woman scholar, and neither of my talks was scheduled as primetime lectures. But one of the famous sheikhs had canceled and couldn't do his Friday night lecture. So instead, I was asked to moderate a conversation between men scholars on tough issues such as domestic violence and homosexuality. At the last minute, they invited a local Toronto Muslim woman activist to join the conversation alongside the four popular male scholars, including Imam Zaid and Sheikh Hamza. The Ritz stage was complete with mega screens, and I wore a pink scarf. And of course, my image was projected from the screens as I moderated the dialogue. The next day, I was walking through the bazaar. A young couple of Arab-Canadian background approached me. "Our daughter was mesmerized by you," they said. They explained that their 4-year-old daughter, after seeing me up on stage, wanted a pink hijab that instant. Their daughter was still young enough to sit in a stroller. The mother swung open the stroller's canopy, and there was the precious girl napping in her pink hijab. Just a couple of months ago, the father shared with me on Facebook that they later discovered that the daughter would hide her hijab in her school bag and put it on at school. And he noted, "You can't underestimate the role model effect on young girls." Nor can we underestimate the need for women's public presence on stage. Because I was on the Ritz stage, this young girl now sees the image of the Muslim woman in hijab as beautiful and appealing, and she chose it for herself. It taught me that my presence alone, not even my words, as a Muslim woman of authority on stage, can be more influential than what any imam says. My power to inspire with my presence and words, I call spirit. And I inherited this power from Muslim women. Ordinary women whose activism wasn't necessarily eye-catching. People weren't writing books about them. However, I did, and I was the first, with my co-author from the UK. Published in 2014, our book was the first dedicated to women's leadership and experience in the Nation of Islam. Since then, several books have been published on this topic. In the book, I tell the story of women's transition from the nation to Sunni Islam with their leader, Imam Wardi Muhammad. I explain the activism I witnessed growing up in the 80s under these community mothers, an activism that revolves around maintaining and growing masjid communities in Black neighborhoods. Former nation women, I wrote, have lived the lives of American women, most working outside the home, while still dedicated to nourishing Muslim domestic life, including certain dietary traditions from the nation, bean soup, bean pie, and wheat bread instead of white. They have brought their personal strivings to the Black masjid, the main location for cultivating community life for themselves and their families. They have a range of committees and groups to choose from to do their work, local and national, and so they have many roles from which to contribute: teachers, directors, fundraisers, consultants, lecturers, event planners, cooks, writers, and artists. The types of activities in which women have carried out these roles include founding and running full-time Muslim schools and Sunday school programs, organizing Muslim fashion shows, organizing community workshops on a range of topics from health to domestic violence, establishing shelters for Muslim women and children, planning national WDM community conventions, participating in interfaith outreach, sponsoring Muslim youth organizations, producing Muslim television shows, leading Girl Scout troops, feeding the homeless, and protesting the establishment of liquor stores in areas surrounding the masjid. As you can see, my community mothers are ordinary women who respond to everyday struggles. However, they are visionaries and leaders in everything from their dress to their community engagement, because they did common things with extraordinary faith. The faith of these women is our most powerful inheritance. When we claim their legacy, we leave a legacy that will benefit others for generations. Ibtihaj with her saber and Barbie, and Dr. Jamillah with her pink hijab. Alhamdulillah, notice that we're holding copies of our books. The first photo, I'm holding my book, which I gifted her at ISNA in 2016, right after she won her medal. And the second photo, we're holding her book during her 2018 tour in Atlanta. I call our legacy this: boldly moving in the direction to which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guiding you. Oprah defined it as preparation meeting the moment of opportunity. In May 2007, I stand on the steps of Duke University Chapel. A Duke newspaper featured 6 out of 3,400 Duke graduates whose stories they found remarkable. I was selected among those 6. Alhamdulillah, my story was unique. I had just finished a bachelor's in electrical engineering and was on my way to pursue a PhD at Duke in an entirely different topic or discipline, Islamic studies. Now, 23 years later, it blows me away to read these lines printed in the article. Jamillah will specialize in Islam in America. She hopes to eventually become a professor and write books. Jamillah commented, Islam in America is an area that has barely been explored by academia. At this point, people have not respected it as a field, but it is the fastest growing religion in America. And I think people are going to have to stop and make note of it. Obviously, when I made these comments, I had no idea that the tragedy of 9/11 would happen, pushing Islam to the forefront of the American media as anti-peace, anti-American, and anti-woman religion. What I did possess 20 years ago, however, was the passion to share with the world my understanding of Islam, a religion that I knew to be pro-peace, pro-American, and pro-women. Preparation meeting the moment of opportunity. My community prepared me by living Islam beautifully. And the moment of opportunity met me then after 9/11 and now, a time when it is absolutely critical to portray Islam and Muslim women in our true light. And this was the result. My first book, American Muslim Women, Negotiating Race, Class, and Gender Within the Ummah, published in 2008, originally my dissertation thesis. From this book, I learned the power of storytelling as I shared women's stories at events like this across the nation. Here is one of my favorite narratives, Dr. Tasneema Ghazi's. She is featured in my book, though not this particular part of her story. Dr. Tasneema is the executive director of Iqra. When I interviewed Dr. Ghazi in her Chicago office, she shared inspiring stories of her early years here in the U.S. Dr. Tasneema came to the United States from India in 1967 in her 20s. Her husband was a PhD student at Harvard. Visa restrictions did not permit her to work, so every day she would go and sit in Harvard Square. She noticed a group of African Americans selling breakfast nearby. One of them came up to her and said, "Sister, you want to help?" She started helping them sell breakfast and found that they were members of the Black Panther Party, a Black freedom movement organization known for its militant revolutionary outlook. They invited Dr. Tasneema to attend their meetings in inner city Roxbury. She did, and at the meeting, she listened to them deliver their fiery revolutionary speeches. Then she stood up and said, "Look, you are my brothers, and let me tell you one thing. Violence does not help anything. You can teach all the violence to the children you want to, and it's going to come back to you. So please, don't teach them that. Let us teach them love. Let us teach them justice." Even though Dr. Tasneema didn't agree with their strategy, she told me that she understood their anger and frustration and sympathized with their experiences as Blacks in the 60s. I love to tell this story because it totally shattered my stereotypes about Indian Muslim women. Before having met her, I personally would have never imagined a young Indian Muslim immigrant mother attending a Black Panther meeting in the Boston inner city, mentoring Black militants. Dr. Tasneema gave me permission to claim Desi American Muslim history as my own. Indeed, the history of Muslim immigrants in this country intersects with the history of Black Muslims in this country, and it does so because of the broader struggle for civil rights. You cannot talk about the legacy of civil rights without talking about Islam, and you cannot talk about the legacy of Islam without talking about civil rights. The two histories are inseparable. And in my 20 years of imparting this, or attempting to, I finally discovered during Black History Month 2019 that the most powerful way to convey it was through my own story, my family's story. I share it today with the hope that you claim it for yourself. My father's great aunt, Basiline Usher, born in 1885, was a student of W.E.B. Du Bois, the great intellectual and champion of African American rights. W.E.B. Du Bois became the first African American to earn a PhD at Harvard University in 1895. When he taught as a professor at the Atlanta University, an institution of higher learning for African Americans, Basiline was among his prized students. She was the only woman in her class at AU and graduated second in the class of 1906. After AU, she went on to the University of Chicago in mathematics and was not even afforded the opportunity to sit in the classrooms. She had to sit outside of the door because she was Black. Basiline returned to Atlanta without completing her master's because her sister died. Her sister, Daisy Inez Usher, was my great-grandmother. Daisy's daughter, Levada, was my grandmother. Basiline adopted Levada after Daisy's death. And so when I came into the world, Basiline, whom we called Aunt Babine, was like a great-grandmother who lived with Levada, who was Granny to me. Up until Aunt Babine's death in 1992, I knew her as the sweet 90-something-old woman who made fresh waffles for me and my siblings when we spent the night at Granny's house. To others, however, she was the serious educator who dedicated her life to the advancement of African Americans. Basiline Usher was the first African American to hold an office in Atlanta City Hall. Her title in 1944 was Director and Supervisor of Negro Schools in Atlanta. Around the same time, she played a key role in the integration of Georgia Girl Scouts when she organized the first Black troops and the first Black troop leaders in Atlanta. My grandparents. Here's a picture of Levada with my grandfather, Dr. Harvey B. Smith. He was a dentist, and my grandmother was a school teacher, and they attended Morehouse and Spelman, respectively. And for those who don't know, these are premier historically Black colleges. The HistoryMakers.org features a biography of my grandfather, Dr. Harvey B. Smith. Time doesn't permit to tell this story in detail, except to share that he entered the United States Army in 1943, which helped him pay his way through Howard University Dental School. And in 1947, he graduated, was married, and opened a dental practice on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Georgia. With his practice located in the historically African-American area of Sweet Auburn, Dr. Smith's patients included Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights leaders. My grandfather passed just a year and a half ago, May 2018. Grandfather's home. This was his house. The caption reads, "Home of Dr. Harvey B. Smith, from 1956 to 2015, designed by renowned Atlanta architect J.W. Robinson. The custom-built mid-century modern jewel, located in the heart of historic Collier Heights, boasts the rare flat-top roof, unique T-shape, floor-to-ceiling window, mahogany ceilings, flagstone flooring, and 3 patios." Growing up, my siblings and I affectionately called it Granny's house. Hands down, Granny's house was our favorite in Atlanta. But apparently, her grandchildren weren't the only ones who thought so. This picture was taken at a benefit concert for the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, on August 20th, 1963. On stage, you see Dr. King and singer-actress Lena Horne. So what does this have to do with my grandparents' house? Their home was selected for the reception that followed the benefit concert. In the photo, in the center is my grandmother, and Lena Horne is shaking my Aunt Jane Smith's hand. The reception was at Granny's because the house was the talk of the town and brand new and beautiful. But what makes this picture most historical is the person standing in the background, right? What makes it even more historical? The reception was a week before the March on Washington, August 28, 1963. There was another key moment in civil rights in 1963. On November 10, 1963, Malcolm X delivered what is considered by many to be one of the most important speeches of the 20th century, Message to the Grassroots, at the Northern Negro Grassroots Leadership Conference in Detroit. Historians generally place Malcolm outside of the civil rights movement. While nonviolence was the radical strategy of the civil rights movement, Malcolm X saw violence as an inescapable part of true revolution. An excerpt from his 1963 message to the grassroots demonstrates this. There is no such thing as a nonviolent revolution. The only kind of revolution that's nonviolent is the Negro Revolution. The only revolution based on loving your enemy is the Negro Revolution. The only revolution in which the goal is desegregated lunch counter, a desegregated theater, a desegregated park, and a desegregated public toilet. You can't sit down next to white folks, or you can sit down next to white folks on the toilet. That's no revolution. Revolution is based on land. Land is the basis of all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality. Even though Malcolm X and Dr. King had different strategies, some contemporary historians highlight ways that they shared a common struggle that necessitated both approaches. In the film Selma, for instance, there is a scene in which Coretta Scott King meets with Malcolm X after speaking to a church crowd in Selma. He met with Coretta King because Dr. King was in jail in Selma, and he imparts to her that by presenting a more extreme position, whites could be more likely to consider Dr. King's demands. Malcolm X's impact on the civil rights movement is most apparent through SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. SNCC was formed to give younger blacks more of a voice in the civil rights movement. As SNCC became more radical in the late 60s, we clearly see the influence of Malcolm X. In 1966, Stokely Carmichael was elected head of SNCC and popularized the term Black Power to characterize the new tactics and goals, including Black self-reliance and the use of violence as a legitimate means of self-defense. Carmichael's successor, H. Rap Brown, went further, saying, "Violence is as American as cherry pie." H. Rap Brown later became the famous Imam Jamil El-Amin. Black power was certainly a concept inspired by Malcolm X and the teachings of the Nation of Islam, as was the concept Black is beautiful. Nation of Islam teachings raised a level of Black consciousness and self-love that was unheard of. For example, consider how we named ourselves. The Nation of Islam came during a time when Black folk accepted the terms Negro and colored. Malcolm X is one of our leaders most known for dropping these terms, replacing them with the term Black. After Malcolm X's assassination, the Chicago Black Renaissance poet Margaret Walker dedicated these incredible words to our great liberator. Snow white Muslim, headdress around a dead Black face. Beautiful were your sandpapering words against our skins. Our blood and water pour from your flowing wounds. You have cut open our breasts and dug scalpels in our brains. When and where will another come to take your holy place? Old man mumbling in his dotage, crying, child unborn. We all love Malcolm, not just the Muslims. But after him, others would carry the Black consciousness movement in their own way. My father, the young Harvey Smith, was blessed to be among those inheriting this legacy and write at Dr. King's alma mater, Morehouse College. And this is where civil rights and Islam meet in my family's history. This is a picture of my father as a brand new imam in 1975. How did my father go from leader of the Black conscious movement in Morehouse College in the late 60s to a Sunni Muslim? My father tells his story in a phone interview I did in February 2019. My father was 71 at the time. The clip begins with my father talking about a bookstore he lived right next to on the historically Black Atlanta University campus.
They owned that bookstore together. And it was right on one of the main thoroughfares where people walked from MLK up to Clark Atlanta and Morehouse and Spelman. Chestnut Street. So Allah put me in that bookstore, and as far as I'm concerned, that's where it started. And I'm reading all these books by Du Bois and all these books. Ronald Siegel had a book called Race War, and James Baldwin, Souls of Black Folks, and James Baldwin, The Fire Next Time, and one of the greatest books that I read was Franz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. black skin, white mask. But one of the main ones was W.B. Du Bois, Africa in the World, or something like that. But it was just countless books. And that's where it started. And then we had a great leader, of course, who used to be with SNCC, named Bill Ware. And I called him the Monster. I named him the Monster. He was really like our leader. I was the leader, but he was my leader. He was older. He used to be with SNCC, with H. Rap Brown and Stokely Carmichael and all of them. And I called him the Monster. That's how much respect I had for him, like Mansa Musa. And so we just got involved with that. We had a freedom school. We had an organization called Black Consciousness Movement, and I was the leader of the Black Consciousness Movement, and I used to speak over there in Morehouse and different places, and we started a freedom school in a little place called the Canterbury House. And we had a program. Daddy came to that program. We had a little I guess you could call it where we invited people and they came to see the children, and we had them doing different things and everything. And so I read the book about Chaka Zulu, and I stopped calling myself Harvey and started calling myself Brother Chaka. So that's when they call me Brother Chaka, like Chaka Zulu. So when I you hear me?
Yes.
So when I went to Washington D.C., going to Howard University, when I first went to Temple number 4, where I met your mother. When I signed in as Brother Chaka. But at Morehouse, I was the head of the Black Consciousness Movement, and we did a lot of demonstrating. This white teacher over at Spelman called his sister from Detroit a jackass in the class. And we marshaled our forces, and this brother Sam Etheridge, who was our artist, he made up a flyer. We had a black man kicking a white lady out, and we went over to her class at Spelman in the Fine Arts Building, and we told her that was her last day. We went in her class and interrupted her class and told that white lady, "This is your last day." And then me and another brother, because by that time I was calling myself Kwame. It was a name from Ghana, certain tribe like Kwame, Kwesi, Kwaku. They had certain names for men if you were born on a certain day of the week. So I took a name. When I finally finished with my name, it was Muhammad. Some people say Kwasi, but my name was Muhammad Kwesi Chaka Lumumba. That was the name that I had put together. Kwesi. Yeah, Muhammad. That was the first part of my name. Muhammad Kwesi Chaka Lumumba. So we
I'm going to cut it short. So after they did that form of resistance by firing the woman, he was asked to go before the board.
They own that bookstore again.
Where he was asked to apologize. And of course he refused. And so my father was expelled. And given his upper middle class privilege, he easily moved on to another school that made most sense for him, and that was Howard University in Washington, D.C. And a series of events led him to attend Nation of Islam's Temple number 2 in Washington, D.C. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? These are Malcolm X's fiery words. 6 years had passed now since his assassination. It was 1971, and the Nation of Islam's message of self-love and self-help continued to reverberate under the leadership of Elijah Muhammad. New members continued to flock to the nation. One was my mother, a native of Washington, D.C. Like my father, she also took on a Pan-Africanist outlook in college, except she attended a predominantly white school in Pennsylvania. But even before college, my mother had read the autobiography of Malcolm X and found its message radically transformative in light of the self-hate she had internalized. When my mother was a little girl, after she played all day in the hot sun, she would spend hours in the tub trying to wash her suntan, or the sun's mark, So when she heard Malcolm X's message, it liberated her. She said, it was almost like my mind was being unshackled to know that black was beautiful, that I'm beautiful, that kinky hair could be beautiful, thick lips could be beautiful, and it was wonderful because this was me. She heard the same message again in 19 when she visited a Nation of Islam temple. My mom explains why she found it so appealing. I wanted to go to something that would make me feel good about myself. In the Nation, they said, the black man is God. With a big hearty laugh, my mom remembers her response as, wow, he is? My mother joined Temple number 2 in DC, leaving her white college. Now both of my parents were at the same temple, worked at Shabazz Bakery together and married in 1972. I was born in 1976, and as I explained in the beginning, this was a year after Imam Muhammad transitioned the community to Sunni Islam. At the age of 35, I was given the opportunity to write parts of this history. Dawn Marie Gibson, an Irish historian in the UK, came up with the idea to write a book on women of the Nation of Islam, which had never been done before. So those who claim the term feminism, this is feminist scholarship at its best. It was Dawn's idea, but she needed my help, and mine in particular, because, alhamdulillah, I had been uniquely prepared to do this job. Dawn specializes in the civil rights movement, and so in our book, we consider Nation women's relationship to the civil rights movement, which, in terms of religion, is generally understood as a Christian movement. As I intend to show in the story of my personal legacy, Rosetta Ross, in her book, Witnessing and Testifying, Black Women, Religion, and Civil Rights, resists the tendency to write black Muslims out of the movement by dedicating a chapter of her book to Sister Clara Muhammad. As many of you know, Sister Clara Muhammad was the wife of Elijah Muhammad and played a significant role in the founding of the Nation of Islam. And one of the greatest contributions of the nation was establishing its own schools on a national scale by the 1950s. The nation's school system for children was given the lofty title, the University of Islam. The University of Islam's beginnings were in Clara Muhammad's home. She and her husband withdrew their children from the public schools in 1934, a time when homeschooling was illegal. Elijah Muhammad was fined and arrested. Clara Muhammad never returned her children to the school, despite harassment by law enforcement. This is what Rosetta Ross says about her in her book, Witnessing and Testifying. Although she was not a part of what might be called the mainstream civil rights movement, Clara Muhammad's role as one who helped construct the vehicle that transmitted notions of race pride to the black masses made her a significant participant in the evolution of the civil rights movement. The more I interviewed former Nation women, the more I came to realize that they not only influenced the concept of black pride, but also Nation women were the women of the civil rights movement before converting. Before the Nation, they had membership or affiliation with the Black Church, a primary location of civil rights activism, and some were members of civil rights organizations like the NAACP and SNCC. No Nation woman that I met proved this connection to the civil rights movement as remarkably as Anna Karim. Anna was no ordinary woman in the nation, or person for that matter. She was invited by Elijah Muhammad personally to join the organization. A SNCC activist carrying out voter registration work in poor rural areas near Tuskegee Institute, where she attended college, Anna witnessed grave atrocities against African Americans. I nearly lost my life, she told me, her words bearing no exaggeration. Some of her peers were shot to death fighting for the rights of others. News of these courageous students made local newspapers that eventually fell into the hands of Elijah Muhammad. Upon his invitation, she sat with Muhammad, who tried to convince her to join the Muslims. She told him, "My work down there, sir, is to help get our people in a position where they can run for elected office. The Caucasians down there have evicted most of them from their land for trying to register to vote. They are sharecroppers, and the SNCC has raised money for supplies, blankets, food, and tents to shelter these people. Sir, I have to go back." Elijah Muhammad answered, "Sister, if you go back, if you continue what you're doing, you will lose your life down there." I thought that was just a ploy to keep me there, but I said, "Sir, I have to go back." He said, "Well, we'll let you go, sister, and we pray that Allah will return you to us." Allah answered his prayer. After Anna nearly lost her life and saw others brutally killed, including the lynching of a pregnant woman, she decided to leave SNCC and join the nation. Anna explained, "I didn't want to die not having accomplished anything, just die on a back road in some rural county and my body be buried in a cornfield or drowned somewhere in a stream. I didn't want to die like that, so I left because I thought there was a higher mission, a better opportunity to help my people with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad." God prepares you for what's coming in the future. Interviewing Anna was a highlight of my career. As I recount in my book, Anna went on to do extraordinary things in the nation and in the Sunni community. Although Anna's story stands out, there are others like her, women who were student activists in major civil rights organizations like SNCC and then chose to become Muslim. Consider this clip from Malcolm X, Make It Plain. The woman who speaks is Sharon 10X. This means that she later became a Muslim after an encounter with Malcolm X, where he essentially tells Sharon 10X what Elijah Muhammad told Anna, that she would lose her life. At 9/11.
As a criminal, brutalized by
denied. Corroborates their reality.
I was probably about 14 years old, and I was involved in demonstrations at this construction site. The community was demanding integration of the workforce. We realized that Malcolm had come to watch the demonstration. When my shift changed, I went across the street to talk to Malcolm. We had quite an argument that morning. And he tried to explain to me what was wrong with my laying down on the ground in front of a cement truck. And Malcolm said, if these are people who they run over somebody with a truck, and he said, oh, they'd say it was an accident. He'd say, oops, my foot slipped. But you'd be just as dead. And when he left, and I turned around to go back across the street, I went back and I got on the picket line, but I never laid down in the street in front of a truck again.
And she later became Muslim, and Sunni Muslim. Her name became Amina Abdurrahman. So to finally conclude on this note of women in the civil rights movement, I want to reveal what I call the big reveal, an exciting development of my personal family history, which proves that you cannot tell Black history without telling American Muslim history, and you cannot tell either history without women. Remember this scene from Hidden Figures. And this photo of Nation Women, we started with in the beginning. The two photos juxtapose, and if it's not obvious, the Gordon Parks Foundation tweeted it. This scene from Hidden Figures was a direct creation of a Gordon Parks photo. And the main home featured in the movie was my granny's house. And the other slide. So alhamdulillah, through Granny's house, my rich family history is permanently preserved in one of the most celebrated films in Black history and women's history. And the Nation of Islam inspired one of its most powerful scenes. Alhamdulillah. Allahu Akbar.